Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Chelsea Ohlemiller, and I am super excited to have another guest on my series, Grief and Goodbyes. And tonight, you may even recognize her. She is Lisa Athan, and she is the executive director and founder of Griefspeaks. Her Facebook page has over 60,000 followers. Her work she has a master's in counseling, so she does a lot of grief work, a lot of grief speaking and education, and provides resources. And so I could not think of a better guest to be here tonight with all of us and to share her knowledge and her inspiration. So welcome, Lisa. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chelsea. I'm really excited to be on.
Thank you. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your platform on Facebook is obviously an extension of your work as a speaker and encourager in the grief space. And so I just wanted to know if you find, yourself always giving advice to people, or what primarily do you use your platform for in the Facebook world?
So on Facebook, my whole purpose is to, like I do in my presentations, to normalize grief and loss. And I love quotes, and I feel that quotes say so succinctly what we want to say, sometimes in a lot of words and books and things. And so I want to just share some hope, kind of like you do on your page and in your book that I'm looking forward to reading, in giving people resources, encouragement, and just putting down some words that really resonate with people, which is so different from what so many people hear, which is, are you over it? Are you still upset about the death, as if it's the flu?
Yep.
And, giving people permission to grieve. And I feel like we almost need permission to grieve in this society. We live in a get over it and move on society. We don't pause in between losses. We don't have enough time to kind of process. So I want to just give people quick something they can read, save, reread, share with somebody to give them a little inspiration and encouragement.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what led me to your page, is that it just has this comforting and hopeful persona about it, and it just helps you feel less alone. And so that's actually what led me to your work and your website, and everything that you do is that social media account. And I think that I love that you say, you wanted to give this quick advice and kind of hope, because that's exactly what I have found there. And I know so many people are. And just like you said, grief is this thing where people are like, why aren't you over it yet? It's been 4 years, or it's been 2 years, And so a lot of times people will say to me, how do you get unstuck? Like, where do you, how do you keep going? I'm stuck. And I'm like, oh, I don't think you're stuck. I think you're just working through it. And sometimes you're in quicksand, and sometimes you're in grass, and it's easier to walk, but it's just this path. And so what kind of resources or advice do you give to people that say, I'm still in this, I'm stuck, I need help? What kind of tips or information do you give?
Well, first, I, like you said, kind of say, I don't know if you're stuck so much as you're in the midst of grief. And I say things like often to people, so it just happened. And they'll pause and say, a year ago? Yeah, it just happened. You just lost your parent. Like your world just turned upside down a year ago or 3 months ago. Or so sometimes it's acknowledge, not sometimes. I find that most of the work that I do is helping people to understand that what they're going through is absolutely normal. And although we feel like sometimes we're going crazy with all these feelings, because again, we don't often in our life have time or permission to feel all our feelings about different things that happen in our life. So when a big loss happens, we feel unprepared. I had a doctor once at Grand Rounds. I did a presentation at a hospital to doctors on grief and loss. And at the end of it, a man came up to me and he looked about 75. And he said, how come no one tells you how much it sucks to lose your father? And for a moment I paused because I'm thinking, this man's already, I said, I know we don't talk about it. He said, my dad just died. He was 95 and I'm 73 and no one talked about it. Like I feel blindsided. Everybody kept saying he's older, he's
Yep.
older. So permission to grieve. I I ask, you know, what does help them, what has helped them in their life in other areas, because I remind people you've had other losses, even if it wasn't a death loss, whether you lost a job, we all went through breakups, we moved, something didn't work out. What were those things, if they were healthy, especially? Because a
Right.
lot of times people adopt unhealthy strategies. But I'll say, what are some of the things that helped you? Was it your faith, sense of humor, friends, reading, crying, hikes, time at the beach, whatever that was, and try to remind them of some of those things also, as well as asking them who's in their support network, if they have a support network.
Absolutely. And what do you say to people? I'm very blessed. I have a great family and a great support system, even though, like I've said before, a lot of my friends didn't understand, they'd never been there before. So what do you say to people that say, I have no support system? My family is small or my friends live far away. What do you say to those people?
So one of the things I'll talk to them about is if they have acquaintances or a friend, a lot of times people will say, I don't want to keep going to that person, of course, because it's only one or two people and they can only help so much. They have their lives. So that's where the resources come in. A page like your page, I'll give them book titles. Robert Zucker, and I can't think of the name of the book. I think it's like A Grief Shared or something, but that's not exactly the name, but it's for parents who have lost someone and their children are grieving, they're grieving. How do we help the children and ourselves? I'll
Absolutely.
give them a support hotline that they can call. I'm big on support groups, like for a parent that has lost a child, Compassionate Friends, and they're worldwide, they can find online. So, one of the things I love doing is when someone tells me what kind of loss it was, I, in my mind, already know a lot of books, resources, groups, and I'll point them to those things as well. So,
That's
and we'll talk about how to talk to someone in their circle, even if it's a small circle, to create better relationships for them while they're in the midst of this difficult time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just such a hard thing to talk about and to ask for help. And, I always say that not that I wanted grief to be this teacher, but it has taught me so much stronger empathy and kindness and grace and compassion. And so I do feel like it helps me prepare for, friends and family that, will eventually
Mhm.
deal with a loss and things like that. And it's also how I can, listen to people on my page who are experiencing a loss, because it's not always easy to hold your own pain and then also have to carry somebody else's. I'm sure you understand that from your platform. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And having lost my mom, I lost many years ago, almost 28 years ago. My dad, 5 years ago. And I know that at different times, although when I lost my mom, I wasn't doing this grief work, but losing my dad in the midst of it and losing a friend and things like that, it is hard. And we have to take care of ourselves. So, like you talk about self care, which is one of those things that's so important. And yet, we're the first ones to say, I'll get to me later. Let me take care of everyone else. But we really have to take care of ourselves. And, getting back to even the support group idea for people that don't have connection, finding a support group, even online, can be so instrumental in our healing and in our grieving because we find other people that understand what we're going through.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that you mentioned in one of the books that you recommended about, grief as a parent, and then also having to help your children grieve and to witness that grief as well. And so I just wonder, I know a lot of my audience has asked me before, and I don't always have, the exact right thing to say, but what is the best way for a parent to grieve authentically and healthy, and then also help their children to grieve authentically and healthy. Do you have any thoughts and resources on that besides maybe that book?
Absolutely. So, first of all, our children are always watching us. They certainly don't always do what we ask them to do, but they're always paying attention. So, grieving is no different. They're watching us. Now, our children are all different. Chelsea, you have three, and they're all very different, I'm sure.
Yes.
Some of our children, like the adults in our life, some people expressing feelings, openly crying, sharing memories, saying, I'm so scared, I'm worried, I feel guilty, I'm angry. For some people, that kind of comes naturally almost. For some children, they, like adults, internalize. So they're grieving, but they're not talking about how they feel and they're not asking a lot. So I suggest to parents, especially if somebody's dying or someone has just died, to let children know, be honest in little bits of information at a time. I always tell parents, you know your children better than any book, any doctor, anyone. You know your child. We have children on the spectrum. We have children that, ruminate over certain feelings and things. So you know your child best, but it is important to let our children know what's going on and give them as many choices as we can. Funerals, a lot of parents will say, do I bring them? Do I not bring them? There's no answer, yes or no. But research has shown that if we can explain to a child what a funeral will be like, people will be laughing, they'll be crying, the person will be there, depending if there's a casket, and we explain. And then we say, does that sound like something you'd like to go to? And the child may say, maybe. Then we say, well, we can have, Aunt Beth has agreed that she'll take you out to the children's play area or outside. So if you want to just come for 5 minutes, and if you don't want to come, you can stay, at your friend's house. I've talked to them. This way you're letting them know, because funerals, services, our grief, us crying, it's really important for our children to see that.
Mm-hmm.
When we're having one of those days where we're wailing in bed and hysterical, which we have those days and those hours, that's probably best. That may overwhelm some of our children, then they get scared. But it's okay to cry and say, Mommy's really sad. A client just said to me today that every time she cries, her dad just died, her daughter will say, is it Grandpa again? Are you thinking about Grandpa? And the 5-year-old said, just don't think about him and you won't be sad. And I laughed and said, your daughter represents half of our society.
Exactly.
But I said that's a learning moment to be able to say, actually, it's okay that I'm sad.
Right.
So I think we can grieve together. The children help us too, because on the days that sometimes we want to stay in bed for like 3 days, we can't. Yep. Because we have to take care of the kids. And my daughter was 4, my son was 5 months when my mother died. And I remember thinking, it's such a mixed bag. I wanted to freeze my kids for 2 years, grieve, and come back to them.
Oh, that's
but life doesn't work like that. It's like, but they helped me through it in their own way just by being themselves also. But I tried to be really honest and say, I'm just really missing my mom. Yep. Or I'm sorry if I seem a little cranky. Sometimes when we're grieving, we're impatient. And again, sometimes because we're not taking care of ourselves.
Wow. That's that's such a good piece of advice, because we've tried to do that with our children. My youngest son wasn't born yet. So we've kind of tried to, introduce him to my mother in other ways, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, my husband said, if you're just crying, cry and tell them, I'm sad and I'm missing, my mom. And so I did it because I wasn't doing that at first. And it just was this huge relief for me too. And it opened up my grief so that I didn't feel like I always had to hide it from them. And now in doing that, and we did that pretty early on, I feel like it really opened it up for them to be able to grieve. And one day, we were just sitting at the dinner table and one of my kids started crying and said, I'm just really missing Meme right now. And I thought, oh, wow, we allowed her to do this, and that's, I'm so glad that my husband, had the awareness to say, let's just, be honest and authentic, because I think it will end up helping them. And it did, and everybody is different. Just like you said, my son grieves so much differently than what my daughter does. And, but I love that you said, to explain to them that sometimes grief is impatience, because I haven't done that. I don't think I've more did the sadness or the, tired or confused, but that's so important to explain to them too, that it can sometimes be anger or irritability, and you don't want it to be, but sometimes it just comes out like that. And so, just as much as the world needs to know that, our kids need to know that too. And so I just think that's a beautiful thing. And that
gives them permission to also have those days and say, I'm just feeling a little cranky. I think I'm just really, it's the grief. The other thing is with children and parents of all ages, with children, young children like you have, but also as adult children, parents and children tend to want to protect one another from their grief. So sometimes we can cry in front of our children, but I've had many children say to me, my mommy just stopped crying over her mom. I don't want to come to her with my sadness, because then she's going to start crying again, and she's been crying. So I've been having some of the parents I work with tell their children very casually, not even in the midst of crying. They could be doing something together. I just want to let you know that when I'm not crying and you don't see me sad, it's fine. It's more than fine for you to come to me when you're sad. As a matter of fact, one of the things that helps us grieve is for moms to be moms. Mm-hmm. And so I have adult kids who are like, I don't want to tell my mom about my grief. And I've had older moms say, I wish they would come to me. I feel like not only did I lose my husband, but now I can't nurture my kids because they're protecting me. So that's important to know as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so important. I also want to mention that I will put all of Lisa's, I will put her website information, I will put her social media accounts, and all of that in the comments section once our video is over. And in the meantime, if you're watching and you have a question for Lisa or something that you want us to discuss, make sure you put it in the comment section, because we'll be reading that as we end our conversation in a little bit. And so I want to ask you, how do you, you do this grief work and you hear these stories as you've obviously been living a life dealing with your own grief. And so do you understand your impact, I guess, on, even strangers like me that you haven't necessarily met in person, not just your clients, but do you ever really internalize your powerful impact that you're having on the healing of individuals out there?
Thank you so much for saying that I had an impact on you and in the work that I do. I think that I think about that sometimes, that it's more of a hope, but I do lately, even on Facebook, I've been getting a bunch of people writing me messages saying, I just want to say, kind of like you did, Chelsea, thank you so much for just the words that you shared. I don't feel so alone. You really helped me through the loss. So that's my goal always, is to create safe spaces for people to be able to share how they feel if they want, or at least know that what they feel is absolutely normal, and that they're not alone, and that there are things they can do and people to talk to that can help them. We alone, unfortunately, have to deal with our grief. That's why we are a society that doesn't sleep well. We keep busy all day. We tell grievers, stay busy. And then they all lie down. And as a woman said to me today, and then my eyes are wide awake and I can't, be on social media anymore. I can't read, but I can't distract my mind from all those thoughts. So we have to do a better job even of taking care of ourselves so we can get sleep. Absolutely. And some of that is like what the things we do before we go to sleep. Are we in a calm space? I recommend like insight timer and calm meditative places. But thank you. I do try to once in a while think, I hope that this can help somebody else and that can help me. And that's because people have helped me along the way, and like pay it forward. I feel like we're all doing that for each other. And every time someone like Brene Brown says about being vulnerable is courageous, every time one of you shares your story with somebody else, you give them permission, like Chelsea did for her children. We're modeling all the time. I tell people we're doing suicide prevention from the moment we get up in the morning, that there's people, around us at the coffee shop. I just had a wonderful interaction with a UPS guy who's it's so hot, and I gave him a couple of seltzers, and we just had such a nice interchange.
Yeah.
And there's moments like that, whether we're grieving, we're sad, whether we're feeling cranky, even to say to our children, today I'm really feeling cranky, or
Right.
today I'm really feeling, we're teaching emotions, we're teaching social emotional learning all the time, and emotional regulation. With our children, we can say, wow, feels like we're all out of sorts today. Why don't we all go in the backyard and play a little bit, go to the park, watch the leaf go down the stream, get in nature, and talk to the kids about things that help you, that might help them. Journaling, I'm a big believer in journaling. And I'll see 3-year-olds sit down with the whole family and they're coloring in their journal, that everybody's going to have a little quiet journal time, play some music.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I definitely think that, there are tons of people that have felt the exact same way that I have with the influence that you have. And, like I said, I found you from your Facebook and your social media accounts because I just constantly found myself being, filled with hope. And just as you said, you wanted to create this safe space. And if, anybody that's watching this has not checked out your space, they need to, because it's just an incredible resource. Your website is full of information, and Lisa she speaks at events, and like I said, she has a master's in counseling, so this is right where you need to be to get the best and the most encouraging resources that there are out there. And like I said, her Facebook page is just filled with people that share that grief experience and that grief story. And it's just a place where you do feel comfortable saying the names of the loved ones that you've lost and telling their death anniversaries or the emotions that you have on any given day. And so if you guys haven't checked it out, make sure that you do. And so I just really appreciate you being on here, Lisa. And I'll just ask you one last question, is just, what are maybe your favorite or your most powerful? I just interviewed Rabbi Steve Leader, and he's the author of The Beauty of What Remains. And
I love that book. I'm reading it right now.
Oh, it's my favorite. I keep going back to it. I got it, obviously it's fairly new, but I got it several years into my grief journey. And I just feel like it's probably the book that has helped me the most. And so when you think back on your, journey and empowering people that are in this grief space, what's your favorite resource or book or anything that you might have?
Some of my favorite books you're asking,
Yeah.
and resources. I would say I love Alan Wolfelt.
Okay.
From the Center for Grief and Loss out in Colorado. Love his work. I love the Dougie Center, which was Donna Sherman, who was the executive director for many years, and she's still with them in Portland, Oregon. She trained a number of us when we were starting a grief center in New Jersey. And I just love their whole message, which is that let the child lead. And that adults sometimes mess up even the way children grieve, because we have all these fears and we're not straight shooting with them sometimes and just answering their questions. And when they come to us. So I've been very much influenced by Donna Sherman's work, Alan Wolfelt, and just so many people. Helen Fitzgerald, who wrote a book, The Grieving Teen and the Grieving Child. And it's an old book, and it's one of my very, very favorite books. And the other group that really has impacted me is Comfort Zone Camp. And Lynn Hughes wrote a wonderful book called You Are Not Alone for teens who've lost a parent. And I was at a camp. I volunteered at one of the camps one summer, and she was there, and she was phenomenal. So there's so many people. Robert Zucker's work. There's just a lot of people. And the book you mentioned, What Remains, I love that book. And I've been quoting some of his work.
Yeah, it was just phenomenal. So, well, I just want to thank you.
And I just want to say one more thing. So the books, the people, but
oh no, I think think we might have lost her, guys. I don't know what happened. Maybe she hit the wrong button. We'll wait a second and see if maybe she can come back. We'll see, guys. Sorry, I don't know what happened. She was going to say something good. I could tell. It was right there. So, well, while we're waiting, Lisa is just a super powerhouse and encourager in the grief space. And so if you are not already following Griefspeaks on Facebook, make sure you do that. And I will link all of her, there she is. I will link all of her, there you are, you're back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. So anyways, I was just telling them while we were waiting for you, because I thought you might be back on, that I will put all of your links and everything in the comment section to make sure that they follow your page. And this video will be available after it downloads for everyone to view at their own leisure. But go ahead, Lisa. Sorry, what were you going to say before you got cut off?
I was.
Oh, no. It happened again. Okay, we'll wait another minute. It's like, I feel like it's like that funny thing, guys, like right when someone's going to say something and then it like goes out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Every time you're like, I'm going to say something, and then it goes, boop.
And trust me, it's not that profound. I was just going to say the things that inspired me the most are people's personal stories of resilience, hope, struggle, and just connection with other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And I think that's what, you know, you said it, just both of our platforms allow people to come and share their stories. And I always tell people it's much as my page as it is theirs. And so that's such a beautiful thing. So.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Chelsea.
And hopefully we'll chat again soon. And everybody, all of Lisa's links will be there. And just thanks for being with us, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.